What's going on, coaches? Welcome back to the Fourth and Goal podcast. Today we have Coach Adam Harvey on. Today, Coach will be talking about defense and how he is able to install his defense to players that have never been in his system before, how he simplifies things down, compartmentalizes and breaks it all down for his players. We'll also be talking about different techniques and some challenges that defenses are facing in this modern age. Welcome, Coach. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well, Josh. Thank you for having me, man. It's really awesome to watch the game grow, and in the land down under, it's pretty sweet. So I really appreciate you having me on, man.
No, I appreciate you giving up your time and chatting and helping us, sort of gain some more knowledge and grow the game down here. So it's great.
No doubt.
For our viewers at home and listeners, do you just give a brief background and sort of your football story and how you came to be where you are at this moment?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I've always been around the game. I grew up in Texas, and so anyone that studied the game of American football knows that Texas has deep ties, and I was certainly no exception. I grew up out on the plains of West Texas, and so there's not a whole lot out there, man. Beer, cotton, and football is about the extent of it, and it was it was a great place to grow up. So I really fell in love with the game at an early age, and I can remember being at state championships at 3 years old, and then again at 8 years old on the shoulders of some cousins who had a fortunate, opportunity to play in those games. And then as I went through grade school, just kind of knew that I wanted to be around athletics. And then, upon completing college, I decided to make a career out of it. And it's been nothing short of phenomenal, man. I just love the game so much. I love the opportunity to change kids' lives through a game. And I think football, kind of warrants that opportunity, especially, again, down here in Texas. There's a lot of great football across America, but at the high school level, it's second to none down here. And I'm obviously partial, but I've been at other states and I've seen it firsthand, and it's nothing quite like Texas high school football for sure. So once I came down to the San Antonio area, I coached at a middle school for 8 years, and that went really well. And then the past 7 years, I've been at the high school level at a powerhouse in the San Antonio area, Steele, and coached some really good Division I athletes who will eventually be drafted if they all stay healthy. And then just recently accepted a position at Hutto High School, which is just outside of Austin, Texas. And so I'll be the defensive coordinator there, coaching outside linebackers. So moving from the back end down into the box, and looking forward to a new adventure there with the Hippos of Hutto. So yeah, man, it's been really good, and I just love the game to death, and looking forward to growing as a coach again here in this next stop.
Brilliant. Well, that's always good. And you see on Twitter, you've got the hippo gifs flying around the coaching Twitter world, and everyone's definitely, cheering for you to with this next step. So here's hoping it's a good one, and you can have a successful time there. So I guess what is
for sure, I appreciate it.
No worries. What would you say is your coaching philosophy? You've just taken a coordinator role and everything. So what would you say is your coaching philosophy, both off the field and on the field?
Yeah, I think that's a broad question that really needs to be answered in short. And in short, I would say, just love people, man. Love people, and again, as I said earlier, teach life through a game. And so the way that I do that, I want to live life 1,000 miles an hour, right? I'm okay with making mistakes. I'm okay with, not always having the answers and making the mark or meeting the mark, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But there's one thing that will always be, and I will always give 100% in everything I do. So that's the way I want to coach the game too. I want to teach kids to be okay with making mistakes, as long as they're making it 1,000 miles an hour. And I don't know a better way to live life. I think living life can be one of two things. You want eggshells and miss a lot of adventure and a lot of neat things about life, or you can just kind of pin your ears back and go, and that's what we're going to do. That's the way I'm going to teach life and teach ball, with whatever kids are in my way. And so, that's taken some growing pains for me too. Sometimes I've got to be able to slow down, step back, and kind of see the bigger picture, in life and in ball. But again, I'm not gonna be that guy that's just gonna tiptoe through life, man. I'm gonna go 100 miles an hour, and if I screw up, that's okay. I'll make adjustments and move on, accordingly.
No, that's it. It's a good philosophy for life and football. Just set sail, set course, and redirect if you're going the wrong way. So it's something I definitely take into my professional career. Is just go, and better to ask for forgiveness than permission, and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's okay to make mistakes, and so many of us afraid to. You get afraid to, then we miss out on opportunities, and not to say that you need to go aimlessly. Definitely need a plan. You need to make sure you're making decisions that are going to benefit you and others. But at the end of the day, man, go, like you were saying, just set your sails and get after it. Love life, live life the right way. And that's the way we're going to play ball too. So.
No, absolutely. So then, how does that philosophy translate into your system and your scheme that you teach and implement to your players?
Yeah, for sure. So our short motto is fast and physical. And I've said in talks with other folks that there's not a defensive coordinator in the country that doesn't want their guys to play fast or physical. And we talk about it all the time, but really, I just want to embed that in our kids. F&P, we're doing dynamic stretches. It doesn't necessarily have to be fast, but you've got to be thinking about how this is going to make you faster, right? So when we're in our indie drills, or when we're in group, or even teaching, I mean, there's things that we teach all the time with mental reps, and a kid has kind of embodied a mental rep as something where I'm watching somebody else do something, and then I'm going to go do it, and listen to the coaching points and do it to the best of my ability. But, those things that when we're taking little reps, whether it's watching film, whether it's watching someone else in a rep, when it's our time to get out there, literally the statistics show that a football game is about 5 minutes of reps. That's not a whole lot of time. So you better play extremely fast, and you better play extremely physical, to make sure that you're doing what you need to put your team in a position to win the ball game. And that's something pride in the weight room. We're going to take pride when we're on the field, ball drills or non-ball related drills. And, it's a mentality developed with our defensive backs. And now I just get to put it all together and just encourage other position groups to way. And if our 11 guys on the field are playing with that mentality, I like our chances of winning for sure.
Absolutely. So then I guess that sort of leads to, what X's and O's wise, what are you teaching your players in terms of, the system? Are you 1 high, 2 high? What sort of coverages, fronts and things are you, without giving away everything, just, your broad sort of, what are you known for being as a defensive coach?
Sure. No, I don't mind my base. We're going to base out of a tight 4 set, 4-0-4 front. I really like the unpredictability of that. I think if you can get some defensive ends that can really go both ways, whether they're pinching inside on the B gaps, whether they're even playing the arrow player and getting all the way to the A gap, or containing out on the C, I think you can be extremely unpredictable from that set. Your 4 linebackers are going to have to really get to the football and get there quickly. So they're seeing a lot of inside zone or duo. I know duo has been a big deal this offseason, and trying those guys to climb up to that second level. If our 3 down linemen can kind of slow those guys, and then our second level play really fast, we're in good shape in the box. It's a lot of stack principles, but it's truly a 3-4. Kind of some of the old 46 mixed into there that the Chicago Bears back in the day ran, and like Ditka and whatnot. But one of the things that I really have kind of taken pride in as a coach is I want to be extremely, like I said earlier, versatile. And I want to take several different, I guess, philosophies and concepts that have worked for people and then mesh those things together. And that's really what, I guess, in a nutshell, our box is going to be. On the back end, we're going to be primarily a zone match team. We'll run some man-to-man, just kind of mixing it up. 1 high or 2 high. I'm going to primarily stay 2 high. We'll do some things to disguise coverages and whatnot, but I believe that you can see things really, really well from a 2 high shell, and then also believe if your linebackers are playing the way they should, then they should protect your DBs. And so, rather than just load up the box, I mean, we want to try to play as fast as we can with our second level players, and then allow our safeties to fit accordingly. Or if they're playing primary or secondary force in a particular coverage, then they can come down into the box and do that post snap, just because we're playing so fast at the second level. And so, we're going to do some different things, and, we'll always make adjustments as needed. But we're really going to try to hang out in that tight 4 as much as we can.
Lovely. So then, you talked about being able to grab different things from various systems that have been successful. What's your approach, or how do you plan on being able to mesh those together so that it does seem like a real system and it's easy for your players to learn, and doesn't really seem like you've grab-bagged everything? Like, how do you bring that all together, or plan to?
That's a great question, Josh. And I think the number one thing is really its identity, right? So going back to one of your original questions and your very first questions about, where is your identity and your coaching philosophy? And so I think if we are taking F&P and we put every concept that we have together, schematically, really, as long as your gaps sound, I don't really have a problem with running any or everything and making it look a little bit like grab bag. Kind of like you said, I'm okay with that. I think your identity is what matters the most, and then obviously technique. We're going to teach a lot of technique, man. We're going to be sound in the calls that we make, but really it's technique. And when we get one-on-one football, we got to win those one-on-one battles. And when we do that, now we have opportunities to get FLs and sacks and interceptions and all the things that come with the big explosive plays. And so I think the identity would be the top number one thing. And then with that in mind, just making sure we're sound, on the board over the weekend. And then when we teach that on Monday morning to prepare for that particular week, the kids have no question. They know exactly what we want to accomplish. And it may look different than the previous week, and we're going to have a backbone, but that backbone is, the way I see it, it's going to take us places, but we may be in a completely different setting, week to week, just because we may play a completely different football team, and so we're going to see different formations. We're going to see different philosophies offensively. What I don't want to do is have a cookie cutter offense that only can stop one offense. I want to be able to be unpredictable and, fluid to be able to work with what we're playing against. So
lovely. So then from that, how do you plan to go about installing these particular things to make sure it's not too overwhelming for your players? How do you plan on being able to install all these different concepts and schematics so that it's not overwhelming for your players?
Sure. Well, one of the things about the pandemic, as crazy as it's been and as tough as it's been, one of the silver lining things is being able to really focus in on a 3-day install, so to speak, and then be able to build on it just even as most recent as last week when we finally got field to kind of test some things out, We're still kind of stuck in that 3-day install right now. To answer your question, if the pandemic hadn't gone down, I have a 5-day install
right.
That I like for the high school kids. And that 5-day install is going to encompass every front that we have, every coverage that we have. And then what we want to do is just mix and match those. So it may seem like we may be throwing more things at our kids as the season goes on, but it really goes back to one of 5 installs where we can now mix and match, again, based on who we're playing, right? So if we're playing a heavy 11 team, or a 20 personnel team, that's running a lot of RPOs and, they're really utilizing that tight end in different ways, then we've got to have answers for however they come out in the line, against us. So with that in mind, we may take a day 1 install and marry it to a 5-day install, but really we haven't repped that. But both, all 3 levels, I guess, for practical purposes, have repped it at one point or another, and then we may just rep it a little bit more that particular week in preparation for that game, so those kids aren't playing confused but playing fast. But they may not have been married together before because we've never really had to put those 2 concepts together, So I think that's the main thing, and we're really with all of our film watching, we've been able to do that, and I feel like we just now need to rep it throughout the summer, and we'll be ready to go in the fall.
Yeah, lovely. What are some of the challenges you've seen or predict to see on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, man, just making sure that those spaces that you mentioned are occupied with the good guys, right? The guys on defense, man. And that's really, really difficult. I think to answer your question and be specific, I think that apex player, those guys that are playing the overhang, those guys are your conflictors at the RPOs. And so if you can get those guys to play extremely fast from depth, you're in good shape. And that's really, really difficult to do. I mean, it doesn't matter what I'm installing. It really doesn't matter what front I'm in, whether it's odd or even. I'm teaching all the second level players to go downhill first, and then when they see pass, to bail. And so if that's happening right now and they're the conflict player and they're already at the line of scrimmage when that mesh is made and he pops up and throws the PO, it's a difficult concept for a young man to understand. And so I think in short, that would be the number one thing that I want to make sure I pay attention to is, keep people in the glance, especially against great RPO squads. Another thing is just not giving up gifts. Man, I don't know. You may or may not have seen some of my stuff over the course of this pandemic, but I'm a press guy, and I just do not want to play off, man, and give up, an easy dip dump all the way down the field, because there's a good bit of programs in our area that are smart enough, that are patient enough to really hammer you and nickel and dime you all the way down the field. And so I'm going to get in people's face, and we may give up a deep ball here and there, but usually the numbers fare out in our favor, because I think that's a difficult route to throw, and especially if we get good hands on from the corner spot. So
that's it. It's one of those techniques that is quite difficult to teach, and it requires some patience on the player's part, that press. What is one way, without going into a long clinic, because I know this will probably could be a whole clinic session, but what's one way you sort of teach the press technique and some of the key coaching points or coaching cues you use when teaching your players how to press efficiently?
Yeah, for sure. I think patience is the number one key. Number one, you don't want to gain ground, because then you're lunging, and if you lunge, then you get a free release. And if you give ground, you're also given a free release. I think a lot of guys teach that inch back technique, and I don't have a problem with it. I just don't know that it's really worth pressing if you're going to inch back anyway. You might as well play catch, and there's some way, like if you're a press team, I understand the inch back technique if you're going to really get hands on and jam that guy. But I think the number one thing is patience. As I said, if you, like what Pete Carroll at the Seahawks used to teach in the pure step. In fact, you said it. I mean, it could be a whole clinic. I spent a whole clinic just earlier today with some coaches out in Germany, which is kind of neat, talking about, some press man stuff and that pure step, whether you're inside leverage and stepping to the outside and redirecting with leverage to get good hands on, to get a jab. It can be head up delivery and just mirror that receiver, whichever if he goes inside, I go outside. If he goes outside, I go outside. And then even maybe an outside leverage type concept where you're mirroring back to the inside to slow his progression and to slow his release. I just think that that's the most important thing. I teach it by saying never cross the river, right? So
Okay.
once he crosses the river, he's in our world. But if I cross the river, then I'm basically overstepping my boundaries, so to speak. And we want to make sure we just stay extremely patient in that concept. And when we do, we usually find kids, they got to hot their first, don't have dead feet. But once you hot your feet, kind of see what he's going to release and then jam him, get good hands on. Usually we play pretty good coverage from a press standpoint.
Brilliant. So then, tracking back to talking about the conflict players and some of the challenges you might see, what would you consider to be one of the more challenging offensive schemes or systems that you would have to defend?
Yeah, I think really right now in today's world, if you're seeing a lot of spread stuff, it's going to be more that tight end hybrid that they can flex out, and then he can go in attached, and then also play in the backfield. I mean, that's really, really tough. Another thing is where they run a lot of gun split. Bash is a kind of a big deal that a lot of people have run, where back away, and they're running GT one side, and that quarterback can read, and he can either hand it to the back out the back door from away from the pullers, or he can even keep it go behind the pullers himself. Those offensive coordinators and their mindsets trying to make us wrong no matter what we do. They're pretty brilliant. They really are. And so I would say Bash would be one, especially from a gun split set where you get a lead blocker. I saw a really neat play. I was watching film just yesterday morning, as a matter of fact. Georgia ran it from a condensed set, and it was, basically a reverse from like a bunch, but they got an H-back out in front as a blocker with a pulling guard. So it's like power, care back this way from a bunch, and they could have handed it and had no ways and outflanked the defense both ways. It was really good. So, I think that, those types of things where there's a lot of misdirection and reads involved, and then you throw the RPO in, and holy cow, here we go. Katie, bar the door, right? Just make tackles. Got to make those in open space, because if we don't, they're going to have success. And then the success really is now going to be based on whether or not you tackle, because if you don't tackle and somebody takes one to the house after a 5-yard catch, but he goes 75 extra and takes it to the house for an 80-yard touchdown, we got to tackle well. So it's just, like you said earlier, man, just getting guys out in space. We've got to be really good in space, and once we're able to put the pads back on, my kids will see, they think I'm intense right now. Wait until we start tackling. That's where my intensity really shows, because I want to be the best tackling team in the state of Texas, and I want to be that team that everybody fears because we're such good tacklers.
Absolutely. So then, what are some of the things that you are doing to teach your players how to tackle in space? Whether that be the different styles of techniques or some coaching points or anything like that. What is something that, the viewers can pick up from you about how to teach the tackling in space?
Yeah, I think it all starts with tracking. Atavis is a really good resource up in the Pacific Northwest and in Washington State. So our coaches association has signed a deal with them, and so they come to our coaching school every year and have some really good teaching. Rex Norris is a guy that's on Twitter that you guys can look up. It's essentially rugby style tackling, but what they do a good job is teaching that closing space and that whole concept. There's a free YouTube video about the hawk tackle concept. I think the hawk tackle is really good. But I think the number one thing is your tracking points. You want to make sure that you don't cross your feet. You want to make sure you always come to balance, and then as you enter into tackling phase, your shoulder leverage has to be on that dude's body. And if you're trying to arm tackle, even with the gator roll, I'm not a huge fan of the gator roll because I feel like a lot of these are falling away from the leverage. I want to be a big leverage guy. So the tracking and space, they're aiming at that near hip and they're going through that near hip. It's still an extremely violent tackle, even though we're trying to take the head out. We're trying to make it more safe. Doesn't mean it's a soft tackle, and that's what I want my guys to understand, like Bobby Wagner, who played there at the Seahawks, and of course Cam Chancellor, and those guys just did it so well. The way that they tackled is the way that that I think we need to be teaching it. And a lot of it's just aiming points again and closing space, tracking that guy down and making sure we aim at the right spot so getting him on the ground at the end of the day. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Seahawks are definitely someone that I watch for that hawk tackling technique. And we were talking about the gun split, bash stuff, and some of the difficult things that the hybrid tight end brings to defenses. Trying to match numbers and leverages and body types. How do you go about sort of countering that, whether it be with personnel or technique?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is kind of stick to what you want to do. Going back to what you were saying earlier, and how you kind of build a defense. You don't want to be grab bag when it comes to that kind of thing, because they're trying to do the exact same thing to you. One of the things that I want to be is multiple, but you still got to hang your hat on something. And so I think what you got to do is really, number one, make sure you're aligned properly and that they're not going to be able to outflank you with an extra guy. If it's the bash concept, just really staying true to the essence of the game. One of the things that I'm going to teach, honestly, not over technique, but as much as technique. And this sounds really funny, Josh, but it's true, man. Don't forget about the big brown thing. Don't forget about the football. I tell kids all the time, like, what's this sport called? It's football. It's football for a reason, because that's the most important thing on the field. So if your key says to run way over there, but that football's going over there, I don't give a crap. You forget about your key and you go tackle the and we can get involved in some of that, because that's what I was coached to do, and now we're coaching robots, and got to really be careful with that, because again, these offensive coordinators and their brilliant minds can get us. So that's one of the things that I just always want to preach. Don't forget about the most important thing, the big brown thing on the field, and let's go play ball. But at the end of the day, you got to, again, just not get outflanked. One of the things I do again is I'll draw a dotted line to every formation that I see on film, and I make sure that we've got the same amount of guys on each side of the football pre-snap. And then I think that we're going to be okay post-snap, because, again, we're going to make our calls, and we're going to do some stunts, and we're going to do some different things to get guys in different gaps. But most of the time they're going to play on their side of the ball, unless I call a stunt where they're crossing over to the other side. So if we can get, really the rule of thumb is 5.5, right? You make 11. If I can get 5.5 on their side of the ball, really it doesn't matter how they line up. And it may look like we're outflanked, but I still got 5.5, and then I might, run some. If they're unbalanced, of course, we're going to shift over and not even, kind of mess around with our alignment. But, I think that's the number one thing, is just to make sure that, again, you're aligned properly and not forgetting about the ball even after you.
Yeah, absolutely. With the football and it's all about the big brown thing. Do you go about teaching turnovers specifically and really focus on that?
Absolutely. Now, that's something I do a little bit differently. Even this morning, as we were working out, I did incorporate balls into our drills, right? So we're just working, communication is the first thing. Make sure we get in the right call, because if we're all wrong, we're all right, And then the second thing is, after we get that mindset, we got the stream call and everything, we're just going to go hard. And if you see a ball, it's live. I don't care if you hear a whistle or not. Play it like it's live, and you never know. There's been some crazy calls in this game. And so, I'll toss a ball on the ground. So we've talked about, the difference between a clean recovery and a dirty recovery, right? So a dirty recovery is footballs are shaped funny, as we all know, and they bounce around crazy, and you never know where they're going to go. And so if you don't think you can scoop and score it, or if it's a questionable, ball, then just fall on it, cover it up like a baby, fetal position. If it's bouncing around and you can somehow scoop that sucker up, chin that ball, become an offensive player and go score, by all means, we want to do that. So we were doing that this morning as they were reading, and not really reading keys, because we're doing a lot on air with all the restrictions and coming out of the pandemic. We're doing everything on air, so I want them to visualize it. But if they see a ball, again, as I said, don't forget about the big brown thing. You go and react to that football, and it may be it may not be in my vicinity, you know, I won't balls over the guys' heads on purpose, you know, just to see how they would react. And so then what we do is if it's on the ground, you know, if they can intercept it, if it's a pass. But if it's on the ground, we always treat it like a fumble, even if it goes over my head. It's a mentality. So that way, that pursuit drill is happening all the time. They treat everything like a fumble, then they're going to get to the football right now. So,
Yep. You just touched on it a little bit. You know, some of the challenges with this return back to sport due to the pandemic. What are some of the things that you're doing that you incorporate with your team and your players to both still get the reps and get football in, but being able to abide by the restrictions, whatever they are, down in Texas?
sure. Yeah, so you know we've got some restrictions both on the width and the depth of it all, and to keep guys certain feet apart. And so what we've done is we call it seventh grade splits, and it's kind of like air raid splits, just wider cones. And we'll put some cones down as offensive linemen, and that way we keep those rules intact, but we're still seeing fits. And so remind them, guys, it's going to be much tighter than this, but at least you get an idea, and we're not just wasting reps. We're getting something out of this. And so that's something that we've done. And we've been able to, again, like I said, on air, go with 7 at one time. And as long as we have everything read out accordingly, they've been able to see it. And then really what it's helping too is just communication wise. We're really communicating a lot right now. And I really like what I see. The kids have bought in, when I make a call and I'm playing quarterback, I'll have the nose guards can kind of, again, separate, but one of the nose guards is snapping the ball as a center. So they're working on ball movement. That's one of the things that just drove me crazy, is watching D-line dump off sides because they're so aggressive, and now you're getting a hard count. I want those guys to think football in everything we do. And so it's been really good. We've just kind of spread things out, and it looks a little bit skewed because it's bigger. But just to continue to remind the kids, hey, these are your fits, and this is what we can do right now. And then once we get over this thing, then it'll look more real later on. But at least you understand the principle.
How do you go about that communication in your system on the field? We hear teams like the TCU 4-2-5 style stuff. They have the Mike linebacker set the front, and they divorce the back end, and they have the safeties being able to communicate each of their splits. There's different coverages. How do you go about ensuring all 11 players are on the same page on the field?
Sure. So we have 2 separate calls, but I wouldn't necessarily say that we divorced the 2 from one another. Everything is going to fit into what we're to do. Kind of the way that we have it structured. The cool thing is, going back to that dotted line concept, and having a 5.5 on each side of the ball. What we're going to try to do and try to accomplish is if my secondary coach is calling out, an offensive formation with doubles or trips, now my guys are understanding what coverages we can run to those particular offensive formations. And then he can call a formation based on that, but it's still going to tie into what we're doing on the front end, right? So that's something that we I'll just call the front end, because I want to see him hit a particular gap, and I want him thinking a little bit. I'll have another coach that's playing that tight end, that flexes, which is where we set the strength to. If he goes out wide, then all of a sudden it's just going to be a Liz call because I'm a right-handed quarterback. So just getting those guys to think, if he's in the backfield, where is he? And how can I now set strength, because this is 10 personnel. I'm just guys to think as much as we possibly can, and then play extremely fast, because I want to snap the ball and go. I don't want going back to your question earlier, I want to go 100 miles an hour. If we're making mistakes, it's okay. We're in day 1 of week 2, guys. I don't need perfection and perfect football players. I just need guys to fast and to start thinking the game. Of course, we want to make sure we're correcting mistakes, but that's really what we're going to do. We're going to do the same thing again tomorrow. We literally have 2 calls in on the front end, and we've got 4 calls in on the back end because it's a little more simple. So it's going 1,000 miles an hour and correcting those mistakes, and we'll gradually stack upon those things that we've already taught.
Brilliant. Well, last question before we'll let you go. Name of the cast is Fourth and Goal. So it's a question we ask everyone, and I'm sure you can sort of see where it's headed.
Sure.
Scenario time, 4th and goal. You're on the 5-yard line. The offense is on the 5-yard line. They're on the left hash, so your right hash. We'll give you a formation. They're in sort of double tight, so they've got a tight end on either side attached. Okay, then they got the twins out to the field as well. So it's like 3 receivers with a tight end to the field, and then a nub tight end in the boundary. And they've got the back in the pistol, right? So the back's directly behind. You can't get a run strength. What are you calling to stop them? You know, they're a power spread style, so that can help with your decision making there.
Yeah, for sure. You know, if it's all right, I'm gonna give 2 different scenarios.
That's fine.
You know, if I go if I go to my even front, I really like a double motor and just really hammer the A gaps right now. Maybe with each and right on top of the guard, and then pinching inside the A, or mixing up that Mike linebacker inside with that as well. And then, what I want to do is spill everything if we're going to be in that front. If we're going to stay in our odd front, I really like 46 bear front to double tight. Not to say that we always have to do that, but that's something that I really like, because what I think we can do now is we can spill with our down linemen, and then have some boxers down in the 9 techniques with those 2 tight ends, and really box everything in and just try to win one-on-one football, as I mentioned earlier. We may, on the fourth down, we're going to play man up. Most likely we may, run a banjo technique on the back end, just to switch any crossers or anything like that. But we're most likely will be in a 1. And then, I'm going to probably send at least a 4th, maybe a 5th guy. Because just, again, go back to what I said earlier, pin your ears back and let's go. If it's 4th down, then we played some pretty good defense down there. So I would imagine our guys are hyped, and if we can penetrate for those gaps, we feel like it's a pass play, then we're going to send somebody maybe from an unorthodox position in the sim or creeper concept, and see if we can't get us a sack and win the ball game. So,
lovely, good answer. It's one of the first to respond with man coverage. A lot of them have been sort of trying to just picket fence it and get some zone in there, and try and make them misthrow the ball, I guess. So it's a nice different answer. I like it a lot. Thank you again for giving up your time and trying to help us grow and sort of gain some knowledge on the defensive side of the ball, and pick up a few pointers. I do appreciate it, and it's always fun chatting ball. So thank you. And for those people watching go follow Coach on Twitter, and if you want to talk ball, I'm sure he's more than happy to, and most football coaches always love it. So definitely hit up Coach and give him a follow on Twitter.